AITA for withdrawing my support after my wife let another man take my seat? I'm David, 46, and by the time of that dinner, I had been married to Melissa for 14 years. I was the quieter one in our marriage, the one who checked dates twice, kept receipts and labeled folders, and still drank coffee from the same chipped mug every morning because one simple habit made the day feel manageable. For a long time, I thought Melissa and I were building something together. I loved how driven she was. She could walk into a room with nothing but a folder and a half-finished idea and somehow leave with 3 people ready to help her make it real. She had a confidence I admired, and in the beginning, she never made me feel small for being different from her. She used to sit beside me at the kitchen counter late at night, barefoot, hair pulled back, laptop open, asking, "Does this sound too aggressive? Or, would you sign off on this if you were on the other side of the table?" I would read what she wrote, mark a few things, and she would lean her shoulder against mine and say, "You're the only person who actually keeps me from spinning out." I believed her. I didn't need applause. I didn't mind being the steady one. If she wanted to be the face in the room, I was fine being the person making sure the room was paid for, the agreements were clean, and the dates weren't creating unseen problems. When she needed a deposit covered, I covered it. When a contract needed my signature, I read it and signed if it made sense. When she needed a personal guarantee because her own credit history or timing wouldn't be enough on its own, I gave it because we were married and I thought her success was our success. The first change was small enough that I argued with myself about noticing it. She stopped saying we. It used to be, "We got the space," or "We landed the sponsor," or "We should celebrate." Then it became my project, my event, my contacts, my vision. At first, I told myself it was just language. People say things when they're busy. People get protective over work they love. Melissa had always been ambitious, and I didn't want to punish her for growing. But then I started finding out about decisions after they were already made. One night, I saw a catering invoice on the kitchen island for an amount I hadn't approved. I picked it up and asked, "When did this get finalized?" Melissa barely looked up from her phone. "Yesterday." I wasn't copied on the final version. It was time sensitive. The joint account needs both of us to approve anything over that amount. She sighed like I was a child interrupting a serious conversation. "David, not every decision needs a committee." I remember standing there with that invoice in my hand, hearing the dishwasher hum behind me, and feeling embarrassed even though no one else was in the room. I said, "I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to understand what I'm responsible for." She put her phone face down. That was new, too. "You're responsible for trusting me." That sentence stayed with me because it sounded loving if you didn't listen too closely. But what she meant was, don't ask questions. Grant started showing up everywhere around the same time. At first, he was just someone Melissa mentioned. Then he was on email chains. Then he was calling during dinner. Then he was at small planning gatherings, standing too close to her, calling her Mel, in a tone that made my skin tighten. The first time he called me Dave, I corrected him. "It's David." He smiled like I had given him exactly the reaction he wanted. "Relax, David. We're just trying to keep up with her." Melissa laughed too quickly. I watched little things after that. Her phone turning over when she walked into a room. Her leaving the kitchen to take calls. The way conversations went quiet when I came near. The way a few people started looking at me with that soft, careful expression people use when they know something painful and are waiting for you to catch up. I tried to talk to her privately. It was after dinner one evening. I'd made grilled chicken and rice because she said she wanted something simple, but she barely ate. She kept tapping her phone, smiling at messages she didn't show me. When she stood to put her plate in the sink, I said, "Is there something going on with you and Grant?" She turned slowly, still holding the plate. "Are you serious?" "Yes." "Wow." She gave a small laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You're really going to make my growth sound like betrayal?" "I'm asking because I feel like I'm being pushed out of my own marriage." "You're being insecure because I'm finally being seen." That hit harder than I wanted it to. Not because it was true, but because it told me what story she had been telling herself. Maybe what story she had been telling other people, too. I didn't raise my voice. I asked for clarity, not a confession. She gave me a speech about trust, ambition, and how she couldn't keep shrinking herself to protect my ego. That was the first time I wondered if she had started treating my silence as something she was entitled to. The money requests got stranger after that. A venue contract showed up with a final balance due the night of an awards dinner I'd barely heard about. A catering deposit had already been charged to a card I authorized for shared expenses, but not for unlimited use. A business loan renewal had language tying my personal guarantee to obligations that were bigger than the last version. There was also an operating agreement amendment that required written consent before certain obligations could be taken on, and Melissa pushed it across the table like it was a receipt for groceries. "It's standard language," she said. "You're slowing everything down." I kept my hand on the pen but didn't pick it up. "Then nobody should mind if I read it." Her eyes cooled. "You know, Grant was right." I looked up. "About what?" "You have this way of making every opportunity feel like a threat." I didn't sign that night. Instead, I made copies. That had always been my habit, but this time it felt different. I printed contracts, payment records, signed amendments, text screenshots, and old email approvals. I didn't know what I was preparing for. I only knew I no longer trusted the version of the marriage Melissa wanted me to live in. A few months before the dinner, I called Elaine. Elaine had been my legal advisor for years. She was blunt in a way that could feel cold if you wanted comfort, but I didn't call her for comfort. I brought a thick folder to her office and asked, "Am I overreacting?" She didn't answer right away. She went through the documents with sticky notes, marking clauses, reading the guarantee language twice, and tapping one page with the back of her pen. Finally, she said, "You are underreacting." I sat back. She turned one agreement toward me. "This requires disclosure before certain financial commitments. This one requires joint approval above a threshold. This guarantee renewal should not be treated like a handshake. She is treating your signature like a blank check." She says I'm being difficult. Difficult is not the same as exposed. I rubbed my eyes. I remember the paper smell in the room, the soft click of Elaine's pen, and the awful feeling that a professional had just named the thing I had been trying not to see. Elaine leaned back and looked at me. "You don't need revenge. You need boundaries with teeth." I wanted to tell her Melissa would never cross certain lines. I wanted to say my wife was ambitious, not reckless. Proud, not cruel. But by then, I had too many small moments stacked on top of each other. Marcus noticed it, too. Marcus had been my friend for over 20 years. He was the kind of guy who didn't dramatize anything. If he said something was off, it was because he'd already spent time trying not to say it. After one dinner with a few mutual friends, he walked with me to the parking lot and said, "Can I tell you something without you biting my head off?" I've never bitten your head off. You get quiet in a way that feels like biting. That made me laugh, but only for a second. He glanced back toward the restaurant. "People have been hearing things." "What things?" "That you're jealous. That you don't support Melissa. That you're holding things up because you can't handle her being successful." I stood beside my car, keys in my hand, watching a couple walk past us laughing about something normal. "Who said that?" He didn't answer fast enough. I nodded. "Melissa." "I don't think they know the whole story," Marcus said. "That means someone gave them a one-sided version." He looked uncomfortable. "There's more. Grant acts like he's already in charge of things." "He isn't." "I know that," Marcus said. "I'm not sure he does." 3 days before the awards dinner, an email landed in my inbox from someone I barely knew, someone connected to the event planning. The subject line was simple: "You should see this." The note was even shorter. "I'm sorry. I don't want any part of this, but this may create legal exposure, and you should know what is being planned." Below it was a forwarded email chain between Melissa and Grant. I read it once at the kitchen table, my coffee going cold beside me. Then I read it again, standing by the window. Then I printed it. Grant had written, "He'll fade into the wallpaper like always." Melissa replied, "After tonight, he'll either disappear or explode. Either way, we control the narrative." Another message from Grant said, "Just don't spook the wallet before the guarantee renewal." The wallet. I stared at those words for a long time. Not because they were the cruelest thing anyone had ever said about me, but because they were so casual. He didn't call me that in anger. He called me that like it was my role. Melissa didn't correct him. A few lines later, she wrote, "He still cares about looking like the good husband. He won't embarrass me if there are witnesses." That was the moment something inside me became very still. I didn't confront her. Not that night. Not the next morning when she came into the kitchen wearing perfume too early and asked whether I'd picked up my suit from the cleaners. Not when she reminded me to bring the folder to the dinner because the venue balance still needed confirmation. I only said, "I'll be there." Marcus texted me the afternoon of the event. "You sure you want to go?" I typed back, "Yes. I want witnesses." Then I put the printed email chain in the same folder as the contracts, receipts, payment authorizations, and agreements Melissa assumed I would never use. That evening, I took extra care getting dressed. Not because I wanted to impress anyone. I just needed my hands to have something ordinary to do. Button the shirt, straighten the cuffs, check the jacket pocket, pick up the folder. When I arrived, there was a printed seating chart near the ballroom entrance. Guests were gathered around it with drinks in their hands, smiling and making polite noise. I stepped closer and scanned the sponsor table first because that was where Melissa had told me we would be. Her name was there. Grant's name was beside hers. Mine was at a side table near the service doors. For a second, all I heard was the clink of glassware and the low murmur of people pretending not to watch me. I looked toward the main table. Grant was already sitting in the chair that should have been mine, adjusting his cufflinks like he had just finished winning something. Melissa saw me from across the room. Her smile flickered, then came back brighter, polished for the audience. She didn't wave me over. She didn't look surprised. Marcus arrived a minute later and followed my gaze to the chart. He said quietly, "I saw it." I nodded. "You want me to come with you?" "Not yet." I walked to the side table and set the folder on the chair beside me. A woman I knew through Melissa gave me an awkward smile and looked away. Someone whispered, "That's him," and another person laughed under their breath. I told myself not to give them the scene. Dinner started with speeches. Melissa looked beautiful, confident, and completely in control. When she stepped up to the microphone, the room went quiet in that eager way people get when they want to be close to success. She thanked sponsors. She thanked the planning team. She thanked relatives for believing in her. Then the projector screen behind her changed to photos from the past year. Melissa and Grant reviewing papers. Melissa and Grant at a reception. Melissa and Grant standing shoulder to shoulder near a display. There was one group photo where I appeared at the edge, cropped so sharply that half my body was missing. Melissa lifted her glass and said, "Most of all, I want to thank Grant, who stood beside me through everything, especially when others didn't understand the vision." A few people turned to look at me. I kept my hands folded in my lap. Grant raised his glass before anyone else. Melissa smiled at him like they were the only two people in the room. I felt anger, yes, but beneath that was something colder. Confirmation. After the applause, Grant stood and walked toward my table. He moved slowly, like he wanted people to notice. When he reached me, he put one hand on the back of an empty chair and leaned slightly, smiling with his mouth, but not his eyes. "David," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Maybe let the people who built this enjoy the night." I looked at him. He glanced toward the main table, then back at me. "The sponsor table is for people who matter." There it was. The little ripple of laughter. Not everyone, but enough. Enough for the room to feel tilted. Melissa came up behind him. Grant's hand settled on her lower back in a way no one could mistake. She didn't move away. "David," she said softly, with that public voice she used when she wanted to look gracious. "Just sit down. People are watching." I looked at her long enough for her smile to falter. Then I picked up the folder and stood. Grant's grin widened, expecting something. A shout. A threat. A shove. Anything he and Melissa could use later. I gave him none of it. I said, "I'm not arguing in front of an audience you invited." Then I walked out. Melissa said my name once behind me. I didn't turn around. The hallway outside the ballroom was quiet except for the muffled applause starting again inside. I kept walking until I reached the parking lot. The air felt cold against my face, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. Marcus followed me out. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I opened my car door, set the folder on the passenger seat, and took out my phone. What I should have done when the first lie touched my signature. He watched me for a second. "You're not going back in there?" "No." "You good to drive?" "I'm not driving yet." I called Elaine. She answered on the third ring. "David." "I'm calm," I said before she could ask. "That usually means you're furious." "It was planned. I have the emails with me." The dinner confirmed it. Elaine was silent for a beat. "Did you threaten anyone?" "No." "Did you touch anyone?" "No." "Good. What do you want to do?" I looked through the windshield at the glow from the ballroom windows. Somewhere inside, Melissa was probably telling people I'd stormed off because I couldn't handle her success. Start with the guarantees, I said. Then the accounts. Then the agreement. Elaine's voice sharpened into business. You can withdraw from obligations you haven't finalized. We can send notice on the renewal. We can freeze access where dual approval is required. Any payments solely in your name can be stopped if the contracts allow it. If she misused funds, we address that through notice, not revenge. I know. Do not text her. Do not threaten him. Do not explain yourself in fragments. Let the notices speak. Understood. And David? Yes. Let them panic. You stay precise. So I did. From the parking lot, I forwarded Elaine the email chain again, along with the most recent invoices and authorization records. She already had the agreements. I logged into the accounts where my authorization was required and removed pending approvals that hadn't been finalized. I sent written confirmation to the bank that I would not renew my personal guarantee without complete disclosure and independent review. I withdrew consent from a pending contract that had been represented to me one way and used another. It wasn't dramatic. It was a series of clicks, calls, and emails. That was the part Melissa had never respected. She loved the stage, but the stage stood on paperwork. The first missed call came at 10:43. Melissa. Then another. Then Grant texted. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I looked at the screen and almost laughed. At 11:08, Melissa left a voicemail. David, you need to call me back right now. The venue is saying there's an issue with the final balance, and I don't know what you did, but this is not the time for one of your little principles. At 11:22, another voicemail. You are embarrassing me. Do you understand that? You're making me look insane in front of everyone. At 11:39, her voice changed. Please call me. The bank called. Grant said this is probably just a misunderstanding, but they're asking about authorization, and I don't know why they're asking me questions like I'm not allowed to approve my own event. Near midnight, Marcus called. You home? He asked. Yes. You should know what happened after you left. I was standing in the kitchen, still wearing my dress shirt, the folder open on the dining table. Tell me. The venue manager pulled Melissa aside. Grant tried to step in, telling her to run the card again. She asked if he was the authorized signer. I closed my eyes for a moment. Marcus continued. He said he was handling it. She said, Sir, you are not the authorized signer. People heard. I didn't feel happy. I felt something closer to air returning to a room. Marcus said, For what it's worth, nobody is laughing now. A car pulled into the driveway 20 minutes later. I knew it was Melissa before I saw her through the front window. She always parked too fast when she was angry. Then I saw Grant step out of the passenger side. That almost impressed me. Not that he came, but that he still thought he belonged in the conversation. I opened the door before they could pound on it. Melissa looked flushed, furious, and scared under her makeup. Grant stood behind her with his tie loosened and his expression tight. What did you do? Melissa demanded. I stopped authorizing things I no longer consent to. You humiliated me. I looked past her to Grant. Interesting choice of words. She pushed inside without asking. Grant followed. I didn't block them. I wanted this clean. The dining room light was on. The folder sat open on the table, pages arranged in neat stacks. Emails, payment records, agreements, screenshots, notices Elaine had already drafted and sent where appropriate. Melissa glanced at the papers and then back at me. You're blowing up our lives because you got embarrassed at dinner? No, I said. I'm ending my exposure because you plan to use my embarrassment as leverage. Grant made a dismissive sound. Come on. Be reasonable. I turned to him. You don't get to spend my money, get involved with my wife, and then ask me for manners. Melissa's face went pale. Grant said, That's not what this is. I picked up the printed email chain and laid it in front of Melissa. Read the subject line. She looked down. Tonight/narrative. Her mouth opened, then closed. I tapped the next page. Read your line. She didn't. So I did it for her. After tonight, he'll either disappear or explode. Either way, we control the narrative. Grant shifted his weight. That was taken out of context. I looked at him, then explained the context of calling me the wallet. He had nothing ready for that. Melissa sat down slowly. The anger drained from her face, and something more defensive replaced it. David, you have to understand. I was frustrated. You kept questioning everything. You made me feel like I couldn't breathe. I asked why my name was on financial obligations I wasn't being allowed to review. You didn't trust me. You gave me reasons not to. Grant stepped closer to the table and pointed at the papers. This is marriage drama. It doesn't have to affect the event or the agreements. I was told this was already handled. I almost smiled. By who? He looked at Melissa. She looked away. I said, that's the problem. You both kept handling things with my signature like I wasn't a person attached to it. Melissa's voice cracked for the first time. We're still married, David. You can't just shut everything down. I didn't shut everything down. I removed my name from what I did not consent to. There's a difference. You're punishing me because your pride got hurt. No, my pride got hurt months ago. Tonight just gave me witnesses. Grant muttered, this is insane. I looked at him. Elaine is already copied on everything. The bank has been notified. Any future questions about my signatures go through her. At the mention of Elaine and the bank, Grant changed. It was small, but I saw it. The confidence left his shoulders. He was no longer the man at the table with his hand on my wife's back. He was a man calculating whether the room was safe for him. The word audit was mentioned, I said. Melissa looked up sharply. Audit. Misuse of funds, failure to disclose material financial decisions, and obligations taken on without proper approval. Elaine will handle the language. Grant took a step back. I'm not getting dragged into your marriage paperwork. Melissa turned toward him like he had slapped her. Our marriage paperwork? You helped me write those emails. I was told this was clean, he said. You told me he was weak. Grant looked at me, then at the folder, then at Melissa. I need to protect myself. That was the first honest thing I'd heard him say all night. Melissa stared at him like she was finally seeing the difference between a partner and an opportunist. I didn't comfort her. That wasn't my role anymore. Grant left before she did. The door closed behind him, and for a few seconds Melissa and I were alone in the dining room we had once painted together. There was still a small, uneven patch near the corner from where she'd gotten tired and laughed while I tried to fix it. I noticed it because pain makes you notice stupid details. Her voice softened. David. No. I made mistakes. You made a plan. She started crying then. Not loudly. Just enough to make the room feel smaller. I didn't think you'd actually do this, she said. I looked at her, and that was when I understood the whole marriage in one sentence. That's why you thought you could. She tried to stay that night. Not in our bedroom, she said. Just on the couch. She said she had nowhere to go, which wasn't true. She had relatives, friends, and apparently a man who had been comfortable sitting beside her in my chair until the paperwork got complicated. I told her to leave. When she refused, I called Elaine, put the phone on speaker, and said, Melissa is here. I've asked her to leave. Please advise. Elaine didn't miss a beat. Melissa, all communication about shared financial matters should go through counsel from this point forward. David, do not engage beyond logistics. Melissa stared at the phone like it had betrayed her, too. She left 10 minutes later. The next morning, the story started moving before I even finished my coffee. A cousin texted me, heard you lost it last night. Hope you get help. One of Melissa's friends sent, you picked the worst possible night to make it about yourself. Someone else wrote, whatever happened between you two, hurting her publicly was cruel. I sat at the kitchen counter with my chipped mug in front of me and read each message twice. The old me might have tried to answer everyone individually. The old me might have defended Melissa publicly while begging for the truth privately. That man was tired. So I wrote one email. Not a rant. Not a social media post. No private photos. No insults. No name calling. The subject line was, correction of false statements involving my name and obligations. I sent it only to people directly affected or already pulled into the situation. Relatives who had repeated claims, partners tied to the agreements, the venue contact, and a few people who had witnessed the dinner. Marcus agreed to confirm what he saw if asked. The email was short. I am not asking anyone to choose sides. I am correcting false statements involving my name, money, and legal obligations. I did not withdraw support because of one embarrassing moment. Attached are documents showing prior financial approvals, guarantee language, payment records, and an email chain discussing plans to provoke a public reaction from me while keeping my financial commitments active. Then I attached the relevant pages. The wallet message. The control the narrative line. The payment records. The agreement clauses. The notices Elaine had sent. After that, The group chat went quiet. Not slowly. Immediately. People who had been brave at 8 o'clock in the morning became silent by 9:30. Melissa's mother called at noon. I almost didn't answer, but she had never been cruel to me, only loyal to her daughter in the way parents sometimes are before evidence makes loyalty expensive. When I picked up, she was crying. "David," she said, "I didn't know she told people you did nothing." I leaned against the counter and looked at the closed folder on the table. A lot of people didn't ask. She took a shaky breath. I laughed at something Grant said. I didn't know what it meant. I remembered her at the dinner, looking down at her plate when Grant spoke to me. "I know what you did," I said, "and I know what you didn't do. I'm sorry. Thank you." That was all I had for her. The days after that were not clean in the way people want revenge stories to be. There were consequences, but there was also paperwork, anger, and disappointment that arrived in waves. The venue demanded payment from the proper party. The pending contract stalled until ownership of obligations could be clarified. The bank required documentation before even discussing the guarantee renewal. People who had praised Melissa's vision suddenly wanted copies of approvals they had ignored when everything looked shiny. Grant disappeared from her side faster than I expected, though maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. Marcus heard from someone that Grant was telling people he had been misled and had no idea Melissa was handling her marriage that badly. That phrase stayed with me. Handling her marriage. As if I were a scheduling conflict. Melissa tried to rewrite the story anyway. She told a few people I was jealous and vindictive. She said I had been waiting for a chance to punish her. She hinted that I had taken documents out of context. Elaine handled it with the professional version of a raised eyebrow. She can say what she wants emotionally, Elaine told me. But when she makes claims tied to your finances or legal obligations, we respond with documents. Marcus sent me a text the same day. I saw it. I heard it. Don't let them tell you it didn't happen. I kept that message. Mediation happened 3 weeks later in a plain conference room with bad coffee and a table too large for the number of people in it. Elaine sat beside me. Melissa sat across from me with her own attorney. She looked smaller than she had at the dinner. Not physically, exactly, but without the room arranged around her, the polish didn't have the same effect. For the first 30 minutes, her attorney spoke about separating finances, pending obligations, and communication boundaries. Elaine answered with documents and dates. I said very little because there was nothing emotional I trusted myself to say that would help. Then Melissa asked for a break. When her attorney stepped out, she looked at Elaine and said, "Can I talk to my husband for 1 minute?" Elaine looked at me, not Melissa. I said, "Anything said here can be said with both attorneys present." Melissa flinched. "I'm not a stranger," she said. "No," I said. "You're the person who planned to humiliate me in front of witnesses while keeping my name on the paperwork." Her eyes filled again, but by then I'd learned that tears could be real and still not be a reason to hand someone access to your life. "I don't love Grant," she said. I didn't respond. I thought he understood me. I thought he believed in me. He believed in what he could get near. She looked down at her hands. "I know that now. I'm sorry you had to learn it this way." For a moment, she looked hopeful, like sorry meant soft. So I finished the sentence. "But I'm not coming back." Her face crumpled. 14 years, David. I know. You're really going to let one night and 14 years. One night didn't end it. One night exposed it. She wiped her face with a tissue. I never thought you'd actually leave. I looked at the table between us, at the printed copies, the signatures, the dates, the neat stacks of proof that my life had become. I thought about every time I'd swallowed a question because I didn't want to embarrass her. Every time I defended the woman I loved while she built a story where I was the obstacle. Every time I mistook being patient for being strong. That was the problem, I said. After mediation, I went home alone. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been quiet before. Not peaceful exactly, not yet. There were still empty places where her things had been. A faint perfume smell in the hallway. A drawer in the bathroom with nothing in it but a hair tie and an old receipt. Little leftovers from a life that hadn't ended with one dramatic slam, but with documents, signatures, and the steady closing of doors. I made coffee the next morning in the chipped mug. I sat at the kitchen counter where Melissa once told me she couldn't do it without me. Maybe that had been true then. Maybe it had stopped being true. Or maybe she had only changed the meaning of without me. She wanted me absent from the credit and present for the risk. Some people did apologize. Not everyone. A few stayed quiet because silence was easier than admitting they had enjoyed the show. A few probably still believed I moved too fast, that I should have waited until after the dinner, that innocent people got pulled into the fallout. I understand why it looked harsh from the outside. But from where I stood, Melissa and Grant didn't make one mistake in public. They made a private plan to use public humiliation as leverage. They counted on me caring more about her image than my own dignity. They counted on my restraint, my habits, my signatures, my money, and my silence. They were right about one thing. I wouldn't make a scene. So I didn't. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a punch. I didn't beg for a chair at a table where my wife had already replaced me. I walked out, called the person whose job was to protect me, and removed my consent from every lie that required my name to survive. The folder is closed now. Not gone, but closed. Melissa wanted me to disappear quietly. So I did. I disappeared from every check, every signature, and every lie she built on my back. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.